Now on BBC One Wales, Jane Hill and Eleanor Rice with the BBC News at 1 o'clock.
The final day of evacuations from Kabul. The government admits some people will be left behind. The day after 90 people were killed in 2 attacks at the airport, the final flights are preparing to leave.
We are now processing approximately the last 1,000 people on the inside of the airfield, and we will fly them out today. That's effectively where we start to move to the next stage, which is the evacuation of our 1,000 troops.
Hospitals have been overwhelmed with people injured in the airport attacks. President Biden promises to hunt down whoever was behind them.
We will not forgive. We will not forget. We will hunt you down and make you pay.
We'll have the latest on today's evacuations and warnings from the UN of a humanitarian disaster in Afghanistan. Also this lunchtime. The risk of blood clots is nearly 9 times higher from catching COVID-19 than from having a vaccine, says a major new study. A world record and a 3rd gold medal for Paralympics GB's Kadina Cox after a stunning ride in the velodrome. And Scotland's Route 66, how gorgeous views of the Highlands have become a tourism success story, though not to the delight of everyone who lives there.
In Wales today, there'll be no significant changes to the COVID regulations here for the next 3 weeks. But calls from one GP for new restrictions to be imposed for unvaccinated people.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the BBC News at 1. The UK's evacuation effort in Kabul is entering its final hours. The government says the operation to process evacuees has now closed and that it is a matter of regret that not everyone trying to get out of Afghanistan will be able to. British military on the ground are now focused on getting the final 1,000 people who are at the airport still onto planes. At least 90 people were killed in 2 attacks at the airport yesterday, including 13 American soldiers. President Biden has promised to hunt down everyone behind the explosions. Our first report is from our defence correspondent, Jonathan Beale.
This the scene of yesterday's deadly suicide attack, just outside the airport. Clothes and belongings strewn across the ground. The remnants of more than 90 people killed. Many more were wounded. Men, women and children who were hoping to get on a flight to freedom, never imagining that some of them would be leaving like this, and seared on the memories of those who survived.
Me and my group waited for more than 25 hours. We did not enter the airport because of the security situation. Wounded everywhere. I cannot explain what we saw today. My word is silent.
Extremists linked to ISIS have claimed responsibility for this evil attack. At dusk, the plumes of smoke could be seen rising from the south side of the airport. The first blast, a suicide bomb near Abbey Gate. The second explosion outside the Baron Hotel, where the British have been processing evacuees.
Talk to one superfan.
At the White House, the Stars and Stripes was lowered, but the 13 US military personnel also killed. Inside, a president under pressure promised revenge.
We will not forgive. We will not forget. We will hunt you down and make you pay.
The president promised to continue the US airlift in these last few days, with the deadline looming. But for Britain, it's almost at an end. It's now closed its evacuation handling centre at the airport. No new claims will be processed.
So at about 4:30 this morning, we authorised the closure of the Barons Hotel, that is our processing centre, and brought across the British, obviously, government officials that were working there, our military, and indeed the people that were inside it for processing. So that is now closed. The Abbey Gate is currently closed and will remain so. And indeed, we are now processing approximately the last 1,000 people on the inside of the airfield, and we will fly them out today.
The final phase of this operation will be getting British troops out. In the rush, they'll have to leave some of their equipment behind. They've already flown out nearly 15,000 people, though the Defence Secretary said with deep regret some would be left behind. The hope now is that the rest may be able to escape by other means. Jonathan Beale, BBC News.
Well, let's talk first of all about the situation in Kabul right now. Our correspondent Yogita Limai is following developments and still so much chaos, Yogita, both in terms of people who want to get out but can't, and of course the aftermath of those attacks.
Yes, evacuation flights taking off. That process has been accelerated, but there are thousands of people who want to leave the country and believe that their window of opportunity to do so is closing. I've been speaking to Afghan nationals all through the last week who have the right permits to fly to foreign countries. They now fear that they will be left behind. They fear for their future under Taliban rule. After all, foreign troops leave, whether it's after the 31st of August or before that. Many people are trying other ways of getting out. So we know that crowds have been building up at the border with Pakistan in southern Afghanistan near Sinboldak, and people are being let through there. But there's lots of people on the Afghan side of the border. We're also hearing reports people trying to go to Iran through the western border of Afghanistan. The Taliban, even an hour ago, their spokesman has said that any Afghan nationals with the right documents will be allowed to leave the country once the civilian side of the airport opens. But this is an assurance that a lot of people do not trust. They've been telling me they do not believe what the Taliban are saying publicly, and they feel they will be targeted if they are left behind.
Yogita, thank you very much. Yogita Limai. Well, let's discuss the politics of all of this as well. We'll be live in Washington in just a moment with Barbara Plett-Usher. First, though, let's go to Westminster and our political correspondent, Helen Catt. We talk about today being the last day of evacuations. What are the absolute final figures that the government is giving you about how many people they have managed to rescue?
Well, we know that this morning the Ministry of Defence was saying they'd managed to airlift out just over 13,700 people by then. And you obviously heard from Jonathan there about those who are still waiting. We're expecting 8 or 9 flights out of Kabul today. And then there's the airlift of the troops. Then the airlift will be over. And once that's happened, the political attention is likely to turn to a few things. So most immediately, MPs from across parties want to know what is being done to help those who have been left behind. Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, is calling for the government to put safe and legal routes out in place. The Defence Secretary has suggested that the UK will beef up the processing capacity in those neighbouring countries that you just heard about, so that people who are able to make it over the border can then come to the UK from those other countries. Although, of course, there is going to be some difficulty, or quite some difficulty for a lot of people in actually getting out in that fashion. There's also likely to be a greater examination of exactly what's happened over the last few weeks and during that big scramble to get out. So the Times today reporting that one of its journalists found the details of 7 Afghans who'd worked either for the British or applied to, scattered on the ground in the embassy. The Foreign Office said it had got 3 families to safety and that every effort was made to destroy sensitive material. I think it's a taster of the sort of questions we're going to see over the coming weeks.
Helen, thank you. Barbara, there at the White House. I mean, President Biden was under pressure before the explosions. How do you assess the state of the administration now?
Well, it's very somber. I mean, there's a somber mood here in Washington with the flags at half-mast. They haven't seen this many casualties in one day in the military in a decade. So they're trying to process that. But yes, inside the White House, there is a scramble to figure out what the political fallout is going to be. You know, the strategy of the administration so far had been to keep their heads up, not apologize for the chaos, and just focus on this massive, nearly unprecedented airlift, hope that things would stabilize over time and that long-term what Americans would remember is that Mr. Biden ended the war. Now this situation has changed that. They don't know exactly what the outcome will be. And certainly the Republicans are poised to make as much political capital out of this as they can. Already some of them have been calling for Mr. Biden to resign, to be impeached. There is criticism, concerns, including among Democrats, about this security coordination with the Taliban at the airport. There's questions about the strength of Islamist extremists still in Afghanistan, whether the Americans should actually leave. And, you know, for Mr. Biden, this is a personal blow as well as a political one. This was exactly the reason why he decided to withdraw from Afghanistan. He didn't want to see any more American troops killed there. And he still says that this has just reinforced his belief that he made the right decision. But he is known to keep in his breast pocket the names of the war dead. And now he's going to have to add to it those killed on his watch.
Barbara Platt-Usher and Helen Catt, thank you. Well, the United Nations has told the BBC that Afghanistan could fall into famine if it doesn't receive urgent aid. The World Food Programme estimates 14 million people are facing the threat of starvation following a recent drought and mounting food prices. And the World Health Organization says its medical supplies in the country will last only a few more days. The BBC's South Asia correspondent Rajini Vaidyanathan has been speaking to people across Afghanistan.
In this hospital, now guarded by the Taliban, lies 18-month-old Abdul. Malnourished, his mother can't afford to feed him. We were sent these pictures by a doctor in the northeast region of Badakhshan, one of the country's poorest. There and across Afghanistan, we've been told food and gas prices have risen since the Taliban took charge. Millions were already on the brink of starvation. Now, the UN says it urgently needs more money to avert a crisis.
Afghanistan stands on the brink of another humanitarian disaster. Without that money coming in, we will not be able to supply food to those 20 million people who are already poor.
So there could be a famine?
Absolutely. That's what we will see if we cannot get our food bundles to them. But because of the drought, because of the conflict, people can't feed themselves.
For years, conflict has ravaged this nation. Earlier this month, explosions rocked the market in Lashkargah in Helmand province, the scene of some of the heaviest fighting, where British troops lost their lives. Just weeks ago, the emergency hospital in the area was full of the war wounded. Today, where battles were once fought, an uneasy calm. Some who fled the city have now returned but are homeless.
On this border, we have a variety of large caliber bullets, most of them from machine guns. And
Viktor Yurasevich is a doctor who stayed behind to help those in need.
The people need humanitarian help. They need food, they need medication. The problem is for those whose homes were ruined in the bombings. They don't have the fundings to rebuild their homes.
All of them are just leave their homes and just want to go.
This week in the northern city of Mazar-e-Sharif, dozens have been boarding buses to get to Kabul. The UN says the conflict has forced more than 500,000 Afghans to flee their homes this year alone.
There's lots of problems. The Taliban are here also, and they don't want to let the people go out of the country.
Mujib, not his real name, is just one of them. His mother lives in India. She fled to Delhi a decade ago after her husband was killed by the Taliban. Now she's terrified for her son. He's really scared. The Taliban are beating people up in front of him every day, she says. They say they're not the same as before, but they are.
The Taliban haven't changed.
The doctor I talked to in Badakhshan agrees that words from the Taliban in Kabul don't reflect the reality beyond. We changed his voice.
As I'm talking to you right now, girls above class 6 aren't allowed to go to school where I am. many women aren't allowed to work.
Even before the Taliban took control, Afghans were suffering. Now, across the country, there are real fears for the future. The world may have left, but Afghanistan still needs help. Regina Vadianalden, BBC News.
Now, the rest of today's news. And the risks of having a COVID jab are dwarfed by the dangers of catching the virus, according to a major new study of vaccinations. Scientists looked at the records of more than 29 million people who'd received their first dose between December and April and found the chance of developing blood clots was almost 9 times higher in people who catch COVID-19 than in those who had a vaccine. Naomi Grimley has all the details.
Lisa Shaw was a well-loved presenter on BBC Radio Newcastle. She died aged 44 in May after suffering from an unusual brain clot, one of the very rare side effects after an AstraZeneca vaccine. Researchers at several UK universities have been trying to pin down the risks of other possible side effects, sometimes seen with either the AstraZeneca vaccine or the Pfizer jab, and then compared them to the risks from getting the virus itself. For every 10 million people vaccinated with AstraZeneca, an extra 107 would be hospitalised or die from thrombocytopenia, which can cause internal bleeding and hemorrhages. But that's nearly 9 times lower than the risks of the same condition following natural infection, and crucially no higher than with other vaccines such as the flu jab. The AstraZeneca vaccine also had a slightly higher risk of blood clots in veins, but again, this was 200 times lower than the risk if you caught COVID. In those receiving the Pfizer jab, there was an increased risk of stroke, but this was still 12 times lower than the risks that came with infection. The researchers hope it will provide context to some of the headlines over the last few months.
And these vaccines appear to be very, very safe. A small number of people do get these outcomes, sadly. These risks seem to be comparable with other vaccines, such as the flu vaccine. If you develop COVID-19, the risks of these same outcomes from our data are just so much higher.
NHS England says it's got new data showing that 100,000 lives have been saved by COVID jabs so far. And it's still less than a year since the vaccination push started. Naomi Grimley, BBC News.
Well, COVID-19 infections have increased in all UK nations. The latest figures have just been released in the last hour. Our health correspondent Philippa Roxby has been looking at the data. What do the figures tell us then, Philippa?
Yeah, these ONS infection figures show quite a different picture across different parts of the UK. So, for example, in Northern Ireland, they expect 1 in 40 people to test positive for the virus now, 1 in 70 in England, 1 in 120 in Wales, and 1 in 140 in Scotland. So quite a different picture. But in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister, said this morning that they've had a record high number of cases reported in the last day, so 7,000. But the question is, do all these cases and infection numbers matter? Well, now that we've got the high levels of protection of the vaccine, these infections are not translating into hospital admissions and deaths the way they would have been at much earlier in the pandemic. But ahead of the bank holiday, health officials are still warning people to be really quite sensible.
And, well, you mentioned the bank holiday for many people, and for a lot of people that means big events, music festivals. We know what's happened in the past. What advice is out there on that front?
That's right. I mean, tens of thousands of young people are expected to go to festivals, including Reading and Leeds and many others this weekend. Health officials are saying test yourself before you go and afterwards, if possible, to make sure that you're not infecting people when you come home. Stay outdoors if you can, where the risk is a lot less, and avoid indoor cramped spaces if at all possible. OK,
thank you, Philippa Roxby. It is 19 minutes past 1. Our top story this lunchtime. The UK's evacuation effort in Kabul is entering its final hours. The government says the operation to process evacuees has now closed and that not everyone will be able to leave.
Oh boy, this has been completely transformed.
Coming up, 5 years after the last BHS store closed, how our empty department stores are being given new life.
Still to come at 1:30, there'll be no significant changes to the COVID regulations here for the next 3 weeks. And following one of the busiest summers ever for staycations, a call for Wales's tourism model to be completely reassessed.
The cyclist Kadina Cox has won the 3rd gold medal of her career and set a new world record with a stunning ride in the velodrome on day 3 of the Tokyo Paralympics. Great Britain's swimmers have also claimed more medals, and there's been success on the track and in powerlifting and wheelchair fencing. Andy Swiss has been watching all the action.
Rarely has British sport seen a more versatile or a more victorious athlete. For Kadina Cox, just the start of what could be another golden games. Cox is a cyclist, but also a runner. At the last Paralympics, she won golds at both. But in her first event here in the velodrome, she was once again unstoppable. The time trial is normally won by tiny fractions. Cox won it by more than a second.
And she's done it in fantastic style.
It was, she said afterwards, near perfection, and didn't her team know it? Cox has another cycling event tomorrow before switching to athletics in the 400 metres, and she's being cheered all the way by her family back in Leeds.
Just providing that support, we've set her up loads of videos, just so that she can feel like she has our support, which obviously she does. So she was watching them before the race, which helped to focus, and she won, which was great.
Meanwhile, there was a second medal for Jacco van Gas in barely 24 hours. The former serviceman won the pursuit yesterday, but had to settle for bronze in his time trial. But more British gold wasn't far away. Over at the pool, in fact, as Hannah Russell led the charge. 2 years ago, Russell took a break from the sport to focus on her mental health. To come back and win, she said, had made her so happy. It was the first of 2 golds in barely 20 minutes. At his first Paralympics, Rhys Dunn taking the 200 metres freestyle in a new world record, no less.
It's gold to Rhys Dunn.
Talk about making a splash. And as the track and field got underway, there was success for Maria Lyle. The 21-year-old won 3 medals at the last Games in Rio, and she sprinted to bronze in the 100 metres behind China's Zhao Jie. For Paralympics GB, another very productive day. Yes, in fact, there has been a host of other British medals. In the pool, there was a silver for Bethany Firth and bronzes for Stephen Clegg and for Jessica Jane Applegate. There were also bronzes for the men's fencing team and for Olivia Broom in the powerlifting. And I can tell you that at the moment in the para-dressage, Natasha Baker is in medal contention. So it has been another excellent day for Paralympics GB here in Tokyo, Jane.
Lovely, thanks very much. Fantastic. Andy Swiss there in Tokyo. The Chief Inspector of Prisons has criticised chronic failings in the management of Chelmsford Prison in Essex. In a letter to the government, Charlie Taylor warns that inmates aren't being kept safe in what's described as one of the country's most violent local prisons. Ministers have 28 days to come up with a plan to improve conditions. 5 years ago this weekend, the last BHS store closed forever. And since then, other department store chains have also disappeared from the high street. In 2016, our main department store chains had 467 shops across the UK. Now, just 79 are left. More than 200 premises are still empty. However, some have been reborn, as our business correspondent Emma Simpson reports.
Look at all these lockers.
Yeah, this is a measure of the human scale of what's happened to BHS. There are 250 lockers in here.
5 years on, brand new hotel bedrooms. The old BHS staff canteen, now a bustling restaurant. This hotel chain jumped at the chance to move in.
Buildings like this don't come along very often. Seeing so many people get use of the space is just fantastic. We've had the opportunity to create new jobs for people and to keep this building alive.
Oh boy. Well, the view's the same, but this has been completely transformed. It's amazing. Yes. And what's this big hole?
The big hole in many ways was the key to the viability of the scheme, being able to form hotel bedrooms.
Bet that was expensive.
It wasn't cheap.
This was one of the biggest BHS stores here on Edinburgh's Princes Street. Today, it's still a work in progress. So that's where the old escalator was. It's gone, as well as all the asbestos. This shop floor has been completely stripped back and ready for new occupiers. There is going to be retail here, just a lot less of it. And this project's been relatively quick. BHS had 163 stores. 40 are still vacant, although half of these do have plans in place.
The challenges are often financial. It costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time to turn large format space into new uses. We need to be heading towards mixed uses. The demand for retail space is far, far less than it was.
In smaller towns, it's far harder to make the numbers add up. In Dumfries, Debenhams was the biggest shop. Gosh, it's a lot bigger on the inside.
There's not been much interest in it, unfortunately, no, not so far.
With a lot of space.
It's a big unit, and this is just one floor.
Scott runs a company which has bought these empty shops, bringing in new tenants through donations and public funding. How much would you like to get your hands on that building?
If we had the funding, absolutely we could take on a building like this. I think it would make a great small boutique cinema with maybe a food court on the ground floor. Upper floors, top floors, potentially residential.
It's just how to pay for it. That's the challenge for so many town centres. These vast, empty department stores will be the trickiest gaps to fill. Emma Simpson, BBC News, Dumfries.
Emergency services are dealing with a large fire at an industrial site in Leamington Spa in Warwickshire. The fire brigade is advising people in the area to keep windows and doors closed and to stay at least 100 metres away from the site. The spending limit on contactless bank cards is to increase to £100 in October. Nearly 2/3 of all debit card transactions are made via tap-and-go technology. The current limit is £45, and some academics are warning that putting it up could increase crime. Now, it has been called Scotland's Route 66. The North Coast 500 has become one of Britain's tourist success stories, offering visitors stunning views of the Highlands along 500 miles of road. But some people who live along the route say its booming popularity has come at a price, as Tim Muffet has been finding out.
The North Coast 500. In terms of boosting visitors to an area often overlooked, it's one of British tourism's biggest success stories.
It's £30 altogether then, please.
You're getting a 500 t-shirt?
Yeah.
Why are you getting one?
Just to see how I've been. We're in the camper vans, me and my friend.
The North Coast 500 was launched 6 years ago. It linked up existing roads around the coastal edges of the North Highlands and rebranded them as a breathtaking 516-mile journey, a kind of Scottish equivalent of America's Route 66.
But success is leaving its mark.
I think North Coast 500 has brought extra tourism to places that perhaps weren't just ready and expecting the boom that it has brought.
Photos have been posted on social media showing what's claimed to be mess and damage left by holidaymakers.
The main downsides, I think, for local residents is that there's been a lot of promotion of the route, but it hasn't really been backed up by the infrastructure. Things like litter bins and toilets and so on. There has been a bit of problem behaviour associated with that.
Much of the route consists of narrow, winding roads. There have been several accidents. This one was filmed 2 years ago on a time-lapse camera. Thankfully, no one was seriously hurt.
Learn how to use a pass in place. If you're in the middle of nowhere, you have to stay on the same side of the road as the side of the road that you're on.
There's obviously a lot of people coming here, and there'll be a lot of people wild camping, and most people who wild camp will be clean, and it just takes one person to ruin it for everybody who leaves a load of rubbish.
The Castle of May in Caithness, once owned by Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother.
We had about 18,000 visitors a year. Once the NC 500 took off, we had nearly 29,000, which is a record. People are coming up and saying, oh, we can do it in 2 days, but it's 516 miles. I think if we all take our time to it and go at a normal pace, then there's enough room for everybody.
The route is promoted by a private company, North Coast 500 Limited. In a statement, the company stressed that it has always encouraged visitors to follow its advice on safe driving, overnight parking and waste disposal, and that the route had delivered huge economic benefits to a fragile part of Scotland.
We have done a lot this year on that. We've brought more toilets in. It's probably never going to be enough. But we are a remote community up here, and it's very difficult to provide what would be expected in the city centres.
As foreign travel gets easier, many predict pressure on the NC 500 route will ease. But others worry that crowds, cars and camper vans risk spoiling this stunning part of the world. Tim Muffet, BBC News.
It is day 3 of the third test between England and India at Headingley. England lost their last 2 wickets within 15 minutes, but ended with a first innings lead of 354. At lunch, India are 34 for 1, still 320 adrift. Let's take a look now at the weather prospects as we head into a long weekend for lots of people. Here's Stav Denaos. Hi, Stav.
Hi there, Jane. Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, the weather should stay dry for the cricket today, albeit rather cloudy. And in fact, it's going to be a bit of a headache to pinpoint where this cloud's going to be today. It's certainly going to be mainly dry thanks to our area of high pressure, but we hold on to thicker cloud towards eastern areas. The best of the sunshine always towards the west. So here's the visible satellite picture which shows you where that cloud is. Quite a lot of it across much of England. Some low cloud. This is low cloud and mist affecting Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland. That's mostly burning away, but you can see a good deal of sunshine across Scotland, Wales and the southwest. Now, we did start off with some good sunshine across East Anglia and the southeast, but some cloud has filled in there over the last few hours, and it stays quite grey as well around the Northern Isles through this afternoon. The best of the sunshine will be across the Scottish mainland. A little bit of low cloud hugging the Argyll and Highland coastline there. But I think an improvement for Northern Ireland this afternoon. We should see plenty of sunshine, quite warm, low 20s Celsius in the warmest spot. Same too for Wales, southwest England, but more cloud for the Midlands eastwards. And it will continue to feel quite cool along North Sea coast because we will hold on to this north-northeast breeze, which will be quite brisk at times. Now, through tonight, we hold on to the breeze there. Variable cloud across central, northern and eastern areas. Best of the clear spells further west. And it's going to be quite a chilly night in a few spots. Under clear skies, we've got single-figure values, just about double figures where we have the breeze and more cloud. So for the weekend, and yes, for many of us, it is going to be a bank holiday weekend. Our area of high pressure holds on. It's going to stay largely dry. Again, variable amounts of cloud and some sunshine. Our area of high drifts towards the northwest of the UK Saturday and Sunday. There's just a threat of 1 or 2 of these showers over the near continent, scraping past the far southeast of England. But I think most places will remain dry through Saturday. But there is that risk there through the day. Notice the wind arrows there. It's going to stay quite breezy for East Anglia in the southeast. Elsewhere, plenty of sunshine around, a bit of low cloud and mist again around coastal parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland. Maybe a little bit down eastern coastal areas where it'll be quite cool. But I think Saturday, a warmer day across the board. We could see the mid-20s in the warmest spots across Scotland and in towards central and southern England. On Sunday, temperatures dip a little bit. We'll pick up a bit more moisture, so more cloud for Northern Ireland, perhaps Scotland and into the northeast of England. Probably the best of the sunshine across the southwest, where we'll see the highs of 22 degrees, so a little bit cooler. Same too for Monday. In fact, at the moment, it looks looking like we could see quite a bit of cloud around. For many of us, it's going to be the bank holiday Monday, of course. The best of the sunshine and warmth in the southwest. Jane.
Thanks very much, Stav. Just a reminder now of our top story. The UK's evacuation effort in Kabul is entering its final hours. The government says the operation to process evacuees has now closed, and not everyone will be able to leave. That is all from the news at 1. On BBC One, we'll join the BBC's news teams wherever you are. Bye-bye.